we go. Welcome to the newest edition of Deals and Deadlines. We are your sports business podcast. That's Hadley Engelhardt. He's an agent and been one for a very long time. He's also our sports business insider. I'm Matt. Thanks so much for joining us. I will remind you guys we have new episodes that drop each and every Friday on all podcast platforms, and you can watch this show on our 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, Hadley, we have a college football playoff to dig into, but I want to talk to you about the business angle of it. So the playoff bracket is set. Each selected team receives $4 million for making the playoff. So right now the breakdown looks like this per conference. 5 SEC teams made it, meaning $20 million go to the pool. 3 Big Ten teams, $12 million. 1 Big 12 team, $4 million. 1 ACC, 1 American, 1 Sun Belt. So as much as these teams love the bragging rights of getting conference, domination and more teams in, it means bottom line dollars.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a home run hit for the SEC. Big money, and even for the smaller schools. You take a Tulane or James Madison, some of this money, this revenue, even in the first round, is equivalent, if not more than, some of the G5's entire total media budget. So this is a big deal for the smaller schools. Obviously, the big schools, it matters. It adds to their wealth, and it's distributed amongst all the SEC teams, and it's broken down based upon who appears in it. They get the lion's share of it. But every school that is part of the SEC benefits from the wealth of the SEC and the Big Ten as well. But, it's great to see these smaller schools generate this type of money. And again, this money keeps increasing if they continue to play throughout the playoffs.
Well, this is where the conversation needs to happen on the 12-team playoff becoming a larger playoff. It's not about what we need. We don't need it. We have to get that out of our mind. We don't need more teams. You want more teams if you're trying to create more revenue, more money for the teams, and thus for the sport. So if we do expand to 14 or 16 teams, you'll kind of understand what that's going to look like. In this year where we have 2 G5s, you're a team like Notre Dame, who's a cash cow and brings eyes to the table. Vanderbilt, who's got a Heisman Trophy candidate. You are leaving some meat on the bone by not having a couple of those teams in the playoff.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they've got to pick the best teams. And obviously the big controversy going into this was, does Notre Dame get in or not? And, they're not part of a conference. And so it's always that part of the debate whether a school like Notre Dame gets in. And, the ongoing debate has been, the Tuesday prior to the selection, they were ranked above Miami.
For 5 straight weeks.
Yeah, correct. And now 4 or 5 days later, with no games being played, Miami jumps them. So I get the discussion, the argument, but, it was head-to-head. Miami beat them fair and square, and we can look at strength of schedule and records against other opponents. But they made a decision, and obviously there was some trickle-down effect, which I'm sure we'll discuss about what's going on with Notre Dame. But the revenue's there, the eyes will be there. I think it's exciting that you have the Tulanes of the world and the JMUs of the world, and probably more the Tulane. I think the Tulane-Ole Miss matchup's going to be great.
Can I stop you though? I want to pick through, because you're a lawyer, and so we hear about tweaks to these setups for these things like the college football playoff. I'm one who, you said we picked the best 12 teams. We didn't. We set in parameters that allows a G5 team to make it. The ACC didn't do a good enough job, so it allowed a second G5 to make it. Hadley, here's what I want to ask you. If I'm college football moving forward, I'm going to set up guardrails to say to the G5s, you're in, but you've got to fit more specific criteria. You've got to be ranked in the top 15 of the final poll. You've got to have a certain amount of wins against power competition, whatever it is, to guarantee that we don't leave out Notre Dame or Vanderbilt over little James Madison, Tulane. And I applaud you for thinking it's great. Those games will die on the vine from a rating standpoint. People will not be into them, and you're not picking your 12 best teams.
Yeah, listen, but we have that same argument. If we went to 16, we're going to have that same argument where there's 17 and 18. There's always the debate that we don't have all the best teams. And even in basketball, I know it's, you take a conference championship from the Sun Belt, they get in. Well, they may knock out an SEC team. That may not be one of the best SEC teams, obviously, but would beat that Sun Belt team every day. So we always have those debates, and that's what's great about it. But, to have the JMUs and Tulanes, I think it's good for sport. Yes, leaving Notre Dame's out big, but if we left Miami out, we'd have these same discussions. So it's never going to be a perfect scenario. Remember, people, we had 2 games not too long ago. We had 2 teams not too long ago. We went to 4, and everyone was bitching and moaning about the 4, and, we need more teams. Now we went to 12, and people are still complaining. So you're not going to satisfy everybody. Financially speaking, the network's going to do fine. I mean, they're going to have eyes on it. And I think it's, again, I think it's wonderful. In fact, I saw a very funny thing. You may have seen the same thing, a tagline for the Tulane-Ole Miss game. It said Tulane versus no lane.
It's funny, it's cute, but I'm going to come back at you. I'm a little surprised to hear you say this because I think college football and the networks are admitting what's going on in the first round of the playoffs. Here's why. Miami and Texas A&M will play noon game on ABC. Alabama, Oklahoma will play Friday night. Primetime, world can watch. The two games that I'm talking about that I think people aren't going to watch, James Madison, Oregon, is going to be played at 7:30 at night. That's going to be on TNT. Tulane, Ole Miss, 3:30 on TNT. Here's why. The NFL's got two games that day. They've got the Eagles and the Commanders at 5, Packers and Bears at 8. So what college football is doing is we're putting our two games that we know the world wants to watch at 8 o'clock on Friday, on opposed noon. Those are not good windows, Hadley. No. Typically, it would be 3:30 and 8 o'clock, and the college football world's like, all right, we're going to bury these games against the NFL on TNT. It's like, what? These are the most important games of your season. It's just, to me, it's not well thought out planning.
Yeah, and listen, those games, those time slots and those networks may have already been set. So whether a Notre Dame, Miami, or Vanderbilt was playing, those time slots, so somebody would have been in those time slots. So we would have that discussion that another game may be there. But yeah, I mean, you've got some powerhouse games. You got Packers, Dodgers, Eagles, and Commanders being played. They're being smart about it because, the NFL is the Goliath, and they know they have to put some games there. I think optically, you're correct. It looks like they're hiding those two games there. But again, if we put Notre Dame and Vanderbilt in place of those two other teams, they may still be in those time slots. So open for debate, but I'm glad to see. I love seeing a few Cinderella teams in a playoff format, and I think it's great for the sport. Listen, I tell Notre Dame this all the time, and people that I deal with up there, join a conference. It takes the debate out of everything because now you're head-to-head with all these teams, and you can make a solid debate.
Okay, so let's talk about the legal end of this. Notre Dame, among, I think, 10 or 11 total schools pulled out of bowl games. Notre Dame's one that can really hurt the revenue of the sport, can really affect the ratings that you're talking about. 2 or 3 brands in all of college football. Notre Dame's one of them that commands the eyes that it does. So ESPN has mentioned Notre Dame pulling out could affect $50 million in revenue from the bowl game that they were going to be a part of, which I guess was the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which just sounds funny to say, but they were going to be the Pop-Tarts Bowl against BYU. Tell me the legal end of that. Could ESPN prove that? Could there be litigation? Could this stop teams from doing it moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure of how the legality of it with the agreements with the media networks are. But optically, it's not a good look for Notre Dame, obviously, because they're now, it's kind of sour grapes, and they're saying, hey, we didn't get in, and now we're not going to play. We're going to show you. But, obviously, there's a number of other teams, about 10 teams to date, that have opted out of playing in bowl games. And listen, for Notre Dame, it's probably more about, hey, we're not playing for a championship. We've got high draft choices. It's more about player safety. Some of these other schools that had losing records that opted out, what ends up happening is because they weren't making the playoffs prior to Thanksgiving, they've already made plans. The kids have already made plans. They've already left campus. So they've already shut down their program. So those programs can now, they may have said, hey, can you all come back? Or, hey, you know what? I'm going on vacation. This guy's going here. Plus, they're dealing with the portal, too. So there's a lot of business going on. Is it really worth it financially for the school? Because the school has to pay for their team to get there. It's a big expense. And if it's not going to benefit them in recruiting, and there's always that injury factor. People have to remember that you're not playing for the trophy. Why continue to do it?
Well, these are exhibition games at that point. It makes you wonder what the long-term viability of the bowl games might be. These are great TV inventory games. ESPN largely has the bowl season. And even though they don't get huge ratings, these games do better than almost anything they would run, and it fills hours and hours of content during December. So the TV folks are going to want this. I wonder, to your point, how much longer we're going to have this influx of games now that we're going to have a playoff that continues to expand.
And by the way, and it's not good. I mean, look, one of the games, they couldn't find anybody. They're getting App State to play Georgia State.
Which is Georgia Southern, who played last month.
Well, they just played a few weeks ago. So, who wants to see that? So they had to fill up a time slot. But I agree with you. Back in the day, obviously pre-COVID and pre-NIL and portal and the money in this business, all these bowl games meant something. At the minimum meant helping you evaluate your future talent. But you don't know if that future talent's even going to be with you because they're going to enter the portal. So there's so many different factors in play that I think these games become less and less meaningful. The big debate this weekend was Alabama losing to Georgia. Will that knock them out? Because it's a bonus game. And so it just shows you how powerful the SEC is, that if you get into the SEC championship, it looks like you're going to be in the CFP.
Okay, something you and I have talked about a lot. When would private equity make its way into college athletics? Well, the seal has been broken. We are here. In a groundbreaking move, the University of Utah Athletics is entering into a deal that could be upwards of $500 million in an equity partnership with Otro Capital, which features the creation and shared ownership for a profit entity to operate athletics, which means they're going to have a say-so in what happens with Utah athletics. And for Utah, they're getting a big check. So what does it mean for them specifically? And do you think now this opens Pandora's box up for more?
Yeah, I mean, this is, we've talked about this several times about what does this mean with this influx of money. The interesting thing, when you have private equity, if you look at a traditional private equity investment in any type of business, they grow it, and in 7 to 10 years, they flip it and they sell it. Well, who are you selling it to other than another private equity or back to the university? So it's going to be an interesting play on how they do this. Utah, they claim, will have the lion's share, will have the majority, so they'll have final say-so. But anytime you bring money into stuff and big money, you know, you always question that. And so a school like Utah, you know, listen, to be determined, right? Is it good for the sport today? I don't know. We'll have to see if Utah and other schools follow. But it just shows you how big business college football is. And really what changed all of this was NIL. I mean, without NIL, I don't think you see private equity getting involved. They talk about facilities and they talk about coaches, but they already had all that stuff. And the alumni already paid for all these things. This really is about building winning teams. And when you have $500 million or whatever it is, it's not just about football and basketball. You can now actually build the smaller teams, the Olympic teams. You can do things to make your university that much more competitive across the board.
To your point, though, I'm going to be fascinated to see that Otro Capital is the name of this equity firm. I'm going to be curious what their ownership is going to be. How much say-so do they have? Are we getting branding on the court? Are we getting, you know, are we changing schedules? How much are they going to be involved? Because you are giving up a level of your control if you're Utah to somebody who's writing you a check, and we'll see who follows and watches it closely.
And by the way, and that will increase the marketing. I mean, they will make sure everything is branded because they have an interest now. They're on the business side of it.
They have ownership.
So when you talk about stadiums, you talk about I mean, everything you can imagine.
Think uniforms, think merch, think all of it.
Everything is going to have a brand to it, which has a price tag to it, because their goal, listen, the private equity firms want to see Utah win, obviously, because that'll bring more value, but they want a return on their investment.
Yep.
And their clients want a return on their investment. And so, and the goal is to make money, grow the brand, and then flip it. So it'll be interesting to see, especially like a school like Utah.
Yeah. All right, coming up, we'll talk about an old dude. I'm talking old, like mid-40s, finding his way back into the NFL. How does that happen? We'll get the agent's perspective on that. Plus, we'll talk about Taylor Swift. Her,
again?
I know. Is her brand being diminished by the NFL? And there's a big change coming to the World Cup. We'll dig into those topics and more next.